This meeting is being recorded.
And Megan, if you can go ahead and put folks on mute, we'll go ahead and get started. Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so delighted to see so many familiar faces and lots of new faces. We have an amazing dream team here of women and girls advocates. My name is Carol LaVoy-Schuster, and I'm the Vice President for Grants and Services at ECCF. These are our bi-monthly lunch and learns. This is Women and Girls Today that we're going to have an awesome conversation about. The lunch and learns were events that we had in a pre-COVID world in person. We would bring fund holders and institutional funders to different communities by bus. Naturally, during COVID, that's not something that we've been able to do. But we heard a lot of fund holders were interested in really hearing, the on-the-ground voices of what's happening in the given topics. So we piloted doing these virtually last year. They've been very successful. And the key here is that we bring to you key leaders from the topic at hand, today's Women and Girls. They're going to each share a little bit about their background, their organization, the key things that they're hearing and seeing impacted in their space during COVID, and then some opportunities that they see on the horizon. And then we'll have a facilitated conversation and we'll wrap things up with some updates by ECCF. The key here is that we've encouraged folks to really share that unvarnished view of what they're hearing and seeing in the community, so that it really brings back that sense of, you're having a coffee with your peer and they're sharing the things that they may not share in like a public forum, so that you as funders can be informed about the real-time impacts. And as I said, if folks could please put themselves on mute, I would really appreciate that so that we can make sure that the speakers have a clear opportunity to present. I am blown away. We've got this dream team here of women and girls, advocates and leaders from across the county. We're going to start off by hearing from the Women's Fund, Emily Gonzalez and Wendy Roworth. As many of you know, or maybe you don't know, the Women's Fund is a field of interest fund at ECCF, and they have this remarkable purview of, a view of the 30,000-foot view and the in-depth experience of funding across Essex County. Then we have Deb Ancillarian from Girls Inc., the Executive Director of Girls Inc., Sarah Stanley, the Executive Director of HAWK, Healing Abuse Working for Change, and Sue Staples, the Executive Director from the YWCA. I'll go ahead and put myself on mute and turn things over to Emily and Wendy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to share what we're doing at the Women's Fund and the effects that we've had and the impact that we've made across the county. So let me tell you a little bit about who we are. So in 2003, 8 women in Essex County joined together to fund women and girls in need in their communities and create positive social change. Today, we have 20 members and an all-volunteer advisory board. We also have Grants Allocation Committee, which this year is made up of a total of 20 members who conduct a very rigorous grant process, which I think we have a wonderful reputation for. And we're fortunate enough to work with, have to give a shout out to he, her, she, Boswego at ECCF. And we partner with organizations that provide women and girls a path to meet their potential, whether it's working to overcome financial burdens, homelessness, domestic violence, food insecurity, mental health crises, incarceration. We do prenatal training with hospitals, grants for that. So we're very proud of that. And I think this is really important to know. With a single donation, our funders and supporters invest in the future of our communities. Giving local is what resonates with our donors. We've done surveys that tell us that. And I think it's really important that we can all work together to build stronger communities where we live. So why women and girls? Something near and dear to our hearts. We've done the research, we read and hear about it every day. A few statistics: 1 in 8 women and girls in Essex County live below the poverty line. 1 in 5 women of color live in poverty. Over 23,000 children in Essex County live in poverty. 34 towns and cities, and many in our 6 gateway cities. Almost 70% of these children live in single mother families, and 44% of the single moms have a high school degree or less. And I think it's super noteworthy, and I actually meant to start with this and say that less than 2% of philanthropic dollars go to organizations supporting women and girls. So we know there is absolutely a huge need. So let's talk about what we do at the Women's Fund. Granting, fundraising, partnering, relationship building. We're growing towards spending more time on that with our donors and with our organizations. So since 2003, when we began, we've raised and donated over $2.8 million to over 150 organizations throughout the county, spanning all age groups, women and girls in need. We fundraise, but how did COVID impact our fundraising? We did 0 events. We were not able to meet. We spoke about it with donors and different people, and really assessed and felt that it probably wasn't something that we felt comfortable doing. We didn't have a platform where we could do virtual events, but we had very successful annual appeals. So for 2 years, we did no fundraising events at all. We partner with nonprofits by funding transformative programs, and I think that's what sets us apart. During COVID, we did do unrestricted funding and granting, but we are known for funding transformative programs, and you'll hear about that from the other women on the panel today. We also provide 2 high-impact grants per year, and we all know, and we're all aware, that education is the strongest pathway to greater economic security, especially for women and girls. So we are very proud of the Essex County Community, the Women's Fund of Essex County Support for Single Mothers program at North Shore Community College. This was started in 2017, and this grant offers eligible candidates the additional financial support that they need to complete their degrees. Another high impact grant that we do every year, annually, it's our Above and Beyond Award in honor of the Founders Circle. So annually, we call on our founders, the women who started the entire concept, and a committee to recommend a qualifying organization that goes above and beyond for their clients. This was started in 2015, and we've given out 7 unrestricted grants. Very proud of that. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Emily right now to tell us how we do it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk about how we do it in terms of the granting portion. And so primarily we fund currently 4 main categories: economic self-sufficiency and security. These are our priorities: and health and well-being, leadership and empowerment of women and girls, and programs that focus on social justice. The application process opens up in the fall, somewhere in October, November, and the applications are due in early January. The Grant Allocation Committee, or GAC, we call ourselves, a group of women that some of us may sit on the board, some of us are just part of the GAC committee, will read and vet all the applications throughout January, and then schedule site visits and conduct site visits. Prior to COVID, we were doing on-site visits. Now we've transitioned to primarily virtual visits. And then all the applications then scored along with our notes and information taken from those site visits. Then the finalists, once everything has been scored, etc., are presented to the advisory board to determine whether they can be funded or not. The pre-COVID, the grants were 3 years, or there was a choice of 1 year or 3 years. Most chose 3 years, with the 2 high impact grants that Wendy mentioned earlier, the Above and Beyond Award and the support for single mothers at North Shore Community College. And then moving on to the impact of COVID. So the first year in 2020, we were pretty much finished with or processing of grants and interviews and so forth, and ended up in March having to do a pivot to really get ourselves organized in helping our organizations. And so we went to 1 year unrestricted grants, and in that 2020, we ended up granting to 12 organizations, a total of $100,000, and then granting to programs or organizations that were outside of our typical granting priority, which was food insecurity, and that was $25,000. And then 2 large, or I should say high impact grants, the Gina Geiger Crisis Center, the North Shore Community College Single Mothers Fund, and then another funding to COVID relief through ECCF. So in 2021, we actually then spoke to many of the organizations that we typically work with, did some research around, and decided to continue 1 year unrestricted granting. And 37 nonprofit organizations were granted a total of $250,000. And then part of that to a $10,000 grant to the Digital Equity Grant for NSCDCF. And Wi-Fi for the Salem Point neighborhood. That was another huge need. And then, of course, the high impact grant. So we have the Family Services of Merrimack Valley and North Shore Community College Single Mothers Fund. So for this year, we are continuing our 1 year programmatic grants. However, we have moved a little back towards focusing on the priorities that I mentioned earlier, which the 4 priorities: social justice, empowerment, and so forth. And the grants are set up to be a maximum of $10,000 for, in terms of applying for. What we had not really anticipated, although I think we perhaps should have, but in hindsight, we had a very large group of applications come in. So 55 grant applications compared to pre-COVID, which would be in the 30s, 30 or so, 32, with a total of about $542,000 for asking. And we have a budget of $250,000. So we're going to be needing to do a lot of work in this process. Okay.
And we wish we could give all the money to everybody who asks.
Absolutely.
So looking ahead to what we think is a very bright future, what COVID has allowed us to do, since we didn't do a lot of fundraising, we were able to go out into the community and ask our donors and our grantees, how can we help make the biggest impact? And we did some convening sessions with our organizations and with executive directors, sharing our story, hearing impact stories, and we take that back to our advisory board, and it does really educate us to how we can do our work better. So, and I'll say we rely on the 3 women on this panel and others like them to help us assess where the impact can be made the greatest within our communities. So, and I know I will go to my grave remembering this, Deb Ann Serlian on one of the convening sessions, when we said, you know, we're going to pivot, we'll give you unrestricted funds, but you need to tell us how we can help you and what you're going to use them for. And she said, you have to trust us that we know what our girls need, what our organizations need, and it's not what we think they need. And I thank you, Deb, for saying that, because we really do trust the system, we trust our people. And we listen to our donors and find out what inspires them to give, because we want to be the best stewards of their gifting. And I have to put a plug in here before I wrap up. We're doing our first in-person fundraiser in May. We're back with Pop Plus. So go to our website, sign up for the emails. Details are coming in the future. And we're going to do a couple of really fun things this year. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. And together we're investing, impacting, and improving the lives of women and girls in Essex County. Thanks. Over to you.
Thanks, Wendy. Deb, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you. Deb from Girls Inc.
Thank you. And it's great to be here and have this conversation. Really looking forward to it. So Girls Inc. of Lynn, we have been doing the work for over 80 years in Lynn. We are a member of a national organization. And collectively, we have been doing the work for over 150 years, inspiring all girls to be strong, smart, and bold. Here in Lynn, we prepare girls ages 5 to 18 in our after-school and in-school programs to lead healthy lives, succeed academically and professionally, and to have the social and emotional skills needed for life. And our programming includes mentoring, leadership, academic support, enrichment programs, and STEM. I thought it might be good to go back through the timeline just to let you know what our journey has been over the past 2 years. So like many of you, in March of 2020, we packed up and went home. And quite honestly, we were having conversations thinking that we were going to be home for 2 weeks. Luckily, I have to say, in January of 2020, we went from a desktop environment to a laptop environment. So right away, we were able to offer virtual programming for the girls. You know, the first thing that we did was when we left, we contacted the girls, made sure that they were okay. At the same time, the schools were trying to continue the way that they were continuing. So we delivered school packets so they could do their homework. We also did some food delivery, whatever the families wanted and needed for the girls who were there. And we switched to a virtual program. And then in June of 2020, our elementary school girls actually came back in person here at 50 High Street. And we went through the summer, they were here for the full day. And then sometime in July, maybe it was August, schools decided that they were going to stay virtual. So for the academic year that year, we offered in-person, on-site remote learning for about 100 elementary school girls. They would come and then do the Girls Inc. experience in the afternoon. At the same time, our middle school and teen girls did programs virtually. We were happy that in July of 2021, the teen and middle school girls returned to in-person learning here. And where we are now is a hybrid. Most of our program is done in person, but we are still doing some programming virtually, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So, you know, the question is, what's the impact? How has COVID impacted us as an organization, our girls, and our community? And, you know, I think that we're still discovering that. We're still talking about that. We're still gathering data and figuring that out. I would say that when we think about the girls, we have definitely seen an impact on the mental health side of things. You know, there's a higher level of stress and anxiety, a general weariness and sadness. But here at Girls Inc., we've always taken a holistic approach to our programming, and social and emotional learning has been the foundation of our programming for this side of forever. So all programs create this space where girls can share what's going on in their lives. And we specifically have also looked at programming to help with issues that the girls are facing. This session, we're partnering with Lynn Community Health Center around a wellness program to talk about coping skills, self-care, meditation. You know, we're not afraid to talk about mental health issues on all spectrums. The other thing around in the mental health space that is to continue to be involved with the families. You know, well, we have not been able to have our family engagement programs here in person. We have done them virtually, and staff continues to reach out to families to make sure that we are connected with them. You know, there's a lot of conversation around learning loss for kids and for girls. You know, we are continuing to work hard to help girls, meet them where they are. You know, one of the programs that we have that's been successful now for 9 years is our Schoolaged Childcare literacy program. Girls in the early grades are matched with volunteers, and typically we have not seen a learning loss over the summer as a result of that program, and we've been able to continue that virtually this year, so that has been helpful to the girls. The other thing that we are doing is that we are in the process of starting specifically a math program to help girls with their learning loss, hiring a coordinator to help us help girls specifically with math skills. When we think about the other impact, Megan, if you'd switch the slide, I think that'd be helpful. Thank you. The other impact is just in the way that we're doing programming, you know, not the foundation of how we're doing the programming, but the ways we're doing it programming. You know, at first we went virtual, all virtual, and then we're now in this hybrid of both virtual in person. What we have found is that some programs work well virtually. You know, our senior mentoring program, that is a one-on-one mentoring program with the girls, that works well virtually. You know, at this point, we still don't have a lot of volunteers in the building. So how do we use volunteers virtually? We have a career path program where girls are introduced to a variety of companies and professions. So that virtually, that has allowed us to do it during school vacations, or when the girls were remote at 1 o'clock in the afternoon instead of at 6 o'clock. And that has engaged more companies than we would normally, and more professionals been able to access. I think the other way that COVID is impacting us is just when we think about childcare and the after school space in general. I think that there is a focus now on how important after school is for getting the economy back going, that if people don't have, places where their kids can be learning and are safe, while families are work, that really is a barrier to getting the economy up and going. It's interesting when I think about the journey that we have been on. We have at every stage there's been something different. In March of 2020, that was very different from what we were dealing with how do we do full day programming in the fall for kids, for girls. Now what we're looking at is, we just came through a surge where we came back from January 2nd, and about a third of our staff was out with COVID, so dealing with that. And the other part, just like with other organizations and across the country, is just workforce, lack of staff, being able to find qualified staff to do the work. And this is impacting us as we think about opening up. We are not at full capacity now for a variety of reasons. Some of it is, we have gone to a cohort model, and for safety, part of it is just getting girls to come back in person for programming. But we're also, as we think about expanding that and opening the building up for more girls, we're faced with a shortage of workforce. And then the last thing for the impact that I'll say is, around this relationship consistency and joy piece. We have always known that relationships are the cornerstone of what we do and are so important. And because we have built those relationships, that has been critical in our success over the last 2 years. I think that the consistency that we have been here for families right from that first day when we left in March of 2020 has been important for families and for the girls. And I have to say that those joyful moments are more joyful. And there's definitely a struggle with kids, and we see that. There are moments of joy, and we celebrate that. I don't know how many of you have been here to 50 High Street. I'm in an office on the fourth floor. Many of our programming during the summer happened outside. I could hear the girls' laughter and screaming and yelling and fun from across the street at the park. And that was just a moment of, to lift your spirit, and that you knew that we would be okay. Megan, next slide. So there's been challenges. I think that there's also some opportunities that we're seeing. And I think that it is in the childcare field overall. I think that the childcare field has been lifted up, and we're seeing where the discrepancies are, the low pay, not enough staffing. I think that there's a real focus on childcare, and I find that both exciting, and hopefully that will continue. I also think that what's happened too is that partnerships within school, and I can speak to Lynn, that we've always had strong partnerships with our schools, but now because we had to partner more to help our kids and continue to that conversation has really opened up, and I hope that continues. And then just the partnership between programs and funders. I mean, Wendy talked about that they convened leaders to talk about what they needed. I think that those conversations are so important. You know, when in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of what can we do to help you from funders? We're going to lessen, you know, restrictions and or you know, you can use it for my favorite kind of funding, you know, unrestricted funding, and what does that what would that look like? I think that the more conversations we can have like that and like this, the stronger we will be as a community. And then the other thing that I hope that continues is what I call the continued exploration. I think that we have been constantly asking ourselves, is this working? How can we do this better? Not only here at Girls Inc. and with the girls and having the girls lead those conversations, but as an organization and as a society. You know, people talk a lot about going back to normal. Normal wasn't working before. You know, what are those things that we have learned that we can continue to do? And then Megan, just the last slide. And then the last thing, and I know EECF is doing some really good work around this, is just what the technology impact has been on kids. You know, just particularly around equity. You know, what does that access look like? You know, no longer is having internet a luxury. It's really a necessity to do our lives. And it's not only about the broadband and being connected, but it's also making sure that they have the right, you know, hardware and tools in order to be able to do that. That can't do everything on your phone. We want to think that we can, but we can't. So making sure that they have that hardware to do that. And that's not a one and done thing, you know, that continues on. So thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. And thank you again for all your continued work and lifting up the importance of partnerships, equity, and digital equity. This is certainly work that ECCF is grounded in, that interconnection and intersectionality across all of the work. I did include a link if folks are interested in learning more about the digital equity work. It's in the chat box. And I'm going to turn things over to Sarah from Hawk.
Hi, everyone. Sarah Stanley. I'm the Executive Director of Healing Abuse Working for Change, and I'm thrilled to be here today to tell you about how our programs can be a catalyst for individual and systemic change, increasing equity and safety for women and girls in Essex County. And I'm honored to be presenting with my colleagues from the Women's Fund, Girls Inc. and YWCA, because when we are funded and work in tandem, we can and do see effective change. So today I want to give you a real picture of what it is like for survivors in 2022 living through the pandemic. I'll use one survivor story to do that, to share with you our objectives and our challenges, as well as the initiatives that we're focusing on for thriving in the future. I am an attorney by trade, and this background anchors my approach to our programming. We see being able to enforce one's rights as the essence of empowerment. We are so honored to have been supported by Essex County Community Foundation, by the Women's Fund, and to be recipients of their Above and Beyond Award during the pandemic as well. Let's see, and Meg, if you go to slide 4. Thanks. So I want to tell you one story today about a woman's experience during the pandemic. Her name is Isabel, and she was married to her partner, Michael, for 10 years. When Isabel, even though Isabel had paid half of the mortgage, the house that they lived in was in Michael's parents' name, and he held this over her for the 10 years that they were married. During the pandemic, Michael's drinking increased. He was let go from his job. He began berating the children, their 2 children, even being violent to the family dog, kicking the family dog and pushing and shoving Isabel. When Isabel told him she would leave him if he didn't get some help, he was enraged. He started calling her incessantly at the dental office where she worked as a hygienist and harassing her and accusing her of having an affair. If she didn't take his calls, he would even show up at her work and make a scene. At this point, Isabel was scared and overwhelmed and really embarrassed. She started experiencing anxiety and even went to the ER at one point because she thought her anxiety attack was a heart attack. Unfortunately, at that time, no one asked her if she was safe at home. When Isabel found a handgun in the glove compartment of Michael's truck, she knew she needed more expert help and reached out to Hawk's emergency hotline. And so I share this story, and while it's challenging to hear, I share this because the impact of the pandemic has been significant. In an anonymous survey conducted by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, 67% of respondents reported new or increased intimate partner violence during the pandemic. And 87% of those experiencing intimate partner violence also report struggling to meet their basic needs. And Megan, if we could go to slide 6. Some of you maybe have watched the show Made on Netflix. And this show about one woman's experience with domestic violence is so impactful because it shows that there's no comprehensive safety net. And there are pockets of help that require trade-offs. And this is where Hawk and organizations like Hawk can come in. Slide 7, please, Megan. Hawk's core services include an emergency hotline, which operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, an emergency shelter, legal services, one-on-one advocacy, children's services, and hospital-based advocacy at one local facility. These services are mechanisms by which we achieve our objectives, which are to triage immediate needs, connect to resources, and empower for long-term success. On slide 8. So this is Isabel's comment when she reached out to us on our emergency hotline, which has been operating every single day throughout the pandemic without disruption, which is a testament to our team's commitment and the collaboration we have with a team of volunteers. So triage is the first step in our services. So when Isabel called our hotline, our team did an immediate assessment of safety and risk of harm. And her case involved several high-risk factors. Her partner had substance use issues, recent loss of employment, violence towards animals, physical violence, and possession of a firearm. So upon learning this, we were able to make an immediate plan with Isabel for the next 24 hours and 48 hours, during which time she went to the local court, met our court-based legal advocates who are stationed in 5 local courts throughout Essex County, and helped her apply for an abuse prevention order, which included the surrender of Michael's firearm. And this in here is, such a critical piece of our crisis intervention. This may have saved Isabel's life. And this is something that we do 25 to 35 times a day, helping someone secure an abuse prevention order. But the importance of keeping people safe, of this tool and keeping people safe cannot be underestimated. So the next step in our services is to connect people like Isabel to the next most appropriate care, whether it's working with police, medical services, or in Isabel's case, coming into our emergency shelter, where her and her children, after 2 years of living on eggshells, were able to regroup. And then The third stage of our services is empowerment. With our wraparound programs, Hawk advocates support a survivor enhancing their 5 domains of well-being, which are safety, stability, meaningful access to resources, mastery, and social connectedness. So how did this look for Isabel? By securing the abuse prevention order, Michael was prohibited from calling or coming within 100 yards of Isabel's work. This ensured Isabel's safety and stability. She was able to maintain that employment, which is a key for her stabilization. By participating in our support groups, she was able to establish a sense of social connectedness. And over the holidays, Isabel made hair bows, which she, a side project of hers, and donated them to children of other survivors. And this was an important step in her healing journey of mastery, knowing that she can also make a difference. So while we're doing this really important crisis intervention, we've been experiencing 3 major challenges. One is the urgency in which our work is needed. While everything has slowed during the pandemic, we are the stopgap that people come to. If they're experiencing delays in getting assistance from Department of Transitional Assistance, they come to us. So there's been real pressure on our team to be responsive, even when we're understaffed and short-staffed. The second challenge we're facing is some impending federal cuts in funding of approximately $150,000 for the next 3 fiscal years, which could directly impact our current services. And the third is something that Deb had touched on, was the value, that we put on the investment that is made in our workforce to ensure that we have talented, skilled individuals who are available to do this work. But while there are challenges, we also are focusing on our opportunities and 3 priority initiatives for change. And the first of those is to have improved access to care in the medical setting. You heard with Isabel, there was a missed opportunity when she went to the ER. The World Health Organization has identified domestic violence as a social determinant of health. And we know 1 in 3 women in Massachusetts experience intimate partner violence. And so we know that there's this disconnect between what is happening when people go to get medical services and what they're experiencing at home. Hawk operates a program at Salem Hospital called Crossroads, where we have a dedicated domestic violence advocate who can support the hospital staff and patients on site at the hospital. We are ready and are eager to scale up this program and have it expand to other hospitals across Essex County. Our second priority initiative is legal representation, as you can guess is near and dear to my heart. When Isabel faced immediate homelessness when she left Michael, he was able to retain possession of the house until a Hawk attorney walked into court with Isabel and argued that all the years that she had been contributing to the mortgage should be part of the divorce settlement. As a result, she received a $30,000 payout to help her buy her own condo. This is a critical step for creating gender equity in Essex County. Rather than paying rent and being caught in the rent cycle, she was able to buy and accumulate equity and wealth. This is the nitty-gritty difference that will turn the tide in gender equity. When women are more financially independent, they are less likely to enter and stay in abusive relationships. And finally, our third priority is education. The first component of our education programming is educating to heal. We run 2 programs, the Parent-Child Trauma Recovery Program and Creative Coping, both of which help parents and children who've experienced domestic violence to understand the impact of trauma and to develop coping mechanisms and strengthen their bond so that they can effectively process the trauma and move forward in resilience. And then, so that's our working to heal, our educating to heal component. And the second is our working for change educational component. And we call this the Our World Youth Empowerment Program that we engage in partnership with local youth serving organizations to provide young people with education about consent, healthy boundaries, the characteristics of a respectful and loving relationship, be it with friends, employers, or romantic partners. Hawk simultaneously trains the adults that support those children and those young adults to increase those organizations' internal capacity to support the young folks. And we have opportunities that are waiting in the wings, such as specifically boys and supporting boys and men to develop a healthy sense of what masculinity can be. So if we could go to slide 17, thanks, Megan. These are 3 photos I would like you to remember. So this snowman was built by children who are living at the Hawk shelter during the recent snowstorms. And I want you to know that there's the joy that we had going out to build this snowman was just beautiful. And this is what childhood should be like and what we fight to make it be at Hawk. The middle picture is my daughter and her 2 friends. These are the young people that are learning about healthy relationships, and they're our next generation of leaders. And finally, this t-shirt was created by a Hawk survivor as part of our clothesline project. And she said she remembered who she was. And I just want all of you to know that you can be part of someone's comeback story, no matter what someone experiences, that there is a future where they can be strong and happy and absolutely themselves. So thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about our work, and we look forward to any of your questions later on.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you for, you were so articulate in outlining the systemic pieces, and, it's amazing the ongoing crisis mitigation work that you do. The advocacy is such a key piece, but then the opportunity to also work with youth around learning about healthy boundaries, to sort of get to the root of the work, which is amazing. So thank you for the ongoing systemic approach in advocacy and saving lives. Okay, I'm going to quickly turn things over to Sue, our last speaker, and then we will open things up. And Sue, as I shared in the beginning, is with the YWCA.
Sorry, mute, which was probably good because I was having a little meltdown with the wrong PowerPoint up there. So my name is Susan Staples, and I've worked at the YWCA for 17 years, and I've been had the privilege of being the executive director for the last 5 years. Next slide, please. The YWCA has been providing services to Merrimack Valley since 1892. Today we have 7 sites, 4 in Lawrence, 1 in Lynn, 1 in Haverhill, and 1 in New Hampshire. We have a Camp Wywood. Next slide, please. So the YWCA offers 26 programs that all fall into these 2 categories. In addition to these programs that are listed, I just want to share a few highlights. We have a gym and a pool, and all our children attending our childcare programs receive swim lessons and pool time every week, with the goal of teaching kids water safety and helping them be prepared as they go out into the warm weather for the summer and helping them to teach their parents too, who don't often have the ability to learn how to swim. We also have a girls center that teaches girls how to avoid high-risk behaviors, helps them develop healthy relationships, and then gain leadership skills. We provide housing to safe, affordable housing to 49 families. And we are the only rape crisis center in all of Essex County. We have 3 offices where we provide services in Lynn, Haverhill, and Lawrence. Next slide, please. Oh my God, who thought 2 years later we would still be talking about COVID? Next slide. So COVID has impacted the YWCA in many of the similar ways it has impacted other nonprofits across the state. Staff are afraid to come to work to be exposed to COVID. Our staff in our childcare and our women and girls services work directly with clients and families. Our families, many of whom are essential workers, were experiencing economic hardships. Many have jobs where if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. And the environmental barriers, the agency had to renovate space to allow for social distancing in classrooms as well as staff offices. Next slide, please. As you can see from this slide, there's a couple things I want to point out. The mother, and it was more than one mother, who had to leave their phone home so that their child could use the phone to access story time and circle learning. Many homes in our area that only had one computer or tablet, yet they had more than 2 or 3 children who weren't all able to participate daily. And not only did our families have limited access to the internet, but our old building was not equipped to handle the increased demand either. Ultimately, our communities need free, accessible, reliable Wi-Fi. Next slide, please. I think many of you may know that nonprofits are not known for being tech savvy, and that is certainly true for the YW. However, I can't say enough about how amazing the staff was during this COVID, when COVID shut us down from, March 17th to June 30th. Staff spent time learning how to go above and beyond to support families and children and help them stay connected. The educators strategized ways to bring some structure into the lives of our preschool children, first using their phones to FaceTime and then quickly figuring out how to use Zoom to read stories and have circle time. This was beyond impressive. In addition, knowing that many of our families suffer from food insecurities, staff from the YW came to work every day during those 3 months to prepare, deliver, and assemble lunches to 18,134 lunches to the children in our Lynn, Lawrence, and Haverhill offices. This level of commitment was beyond anything that I could have imagined. Another highlight is around our women's health program, which is a very small program. We have 1.5 staff right now, but from January to October, they provided virtual workshops on breast health to 756 women. And of those, 350 women went to Lawrence General Hospital, our partner, to get a mammogram. 22 of those women had findings that required follow-up, and 3 of those women were diagnosed with breast cancer. All because of the work the YW was doing with these families. These women received treatment. And are doing well. Next slide, please. Okay. Skip to slide 9, please. So what did we learn and what opportunities? We learned that nonprofits did have the ability to adapt very quickly to the virtual world without much training or support. Workers put their fears aside to come to work every day to support our programs. Childcare staff, who are considered essential workers, came to work every day despite their fears so that the parents of our children, who are also essential workers, could go to work. We know that the YW will continue to provide great work. We will continue to learn and analyze how to provide the best services to our families. You can help us support these programs by becoming partners of the YW. And I want to thank those of you who are already partners of the YW, because we have many, many partners, and partners who supported us during COVID, as Deb was talking about, with unrestricted money. I want to thank Megan for helping with the PowerPoint, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thanks, Sue. And not surprisingly, you know, it's reflective again of the, you can see the common threads that echoed through all of the conversations, the things that were lifted up are mirrors to the Think Labs that ECCF hosted throughout COVID and have now emerged as systems approaches like digital equity, food, and behavioral health, which are ongoing right now. So thank you to all of our speakers for such dynamic work and advocacy, saving lives, looking at root and systemic causes, and then keeping going with the day-to-day. So I'm going to go ahead and open things up for questions. You can use your emoji for your hand, or you can raise your hand and I will sort of facilitate the conversation. No questions? I'm sure that there are lots of questions. Okay, no questions. So I will go ahead and jump in with, oh, I do see a question from Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Carol. Thank you, each of our speakers. This is a topic that's near and dear to my family's life, so it's great to see the attention being paid and the success that you're having. And Carol, you talked about a couple of themes that were recurring across each one of their stories, and it touched on a conversation that's springing up in my journey as well. And I see a bunch of the other leaders from ECCF here on the call, so I'm not sure this notion of digital health equity. The question that came up yesterday was healthcare equity, and in particular, Dr. Higgins, the current president of Brigham and Women's Hospital, has just turned out a report on the issue of how you get, I'm going to call it healthcare equity. I don't know enough about this to be as articulate as I'd like to be. But boy, there's a huge difference, as the stories that you all shared today indicate, between somebody that knows the system and has the right insurance and has the right connections and the right experience. And we all find our way to Brigham and Women's Hospital quite conveniently and often into the right programs with the right backing. But as three of us were saying in a long conversation yesterday, that isn't fair. You know, we're nowhere near fair on this. So the thought that came to mind, listening again to each one of the sessions that was today, somehow I think there's a question in my mind. As you all from ECCF know, I so believe in what you're doing with digital equity. But there's healthcare equities just as legitimate a question. And Carol, I think what I'll do is I'll forward you a copy of Dr. Higgins, the link to Dr. Higgins' work, okay? And perhaps you could share it with the people you think would be appropriate, in particular the leaders here. Obviously, that's well beyond Essex County, but it still strikes me as a topic we're going to need to get to know better. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Steve. Yeah, and I think we could probably ask specifically the YW and Sarah to speak specifically on this. You know, the YW mammogram program has been a foundational for a long time to address social determinants of health, and also as demonstrated by Sarah's work at Hawk, right? That advocacy piece is the key, one of the keys for access, addressing trust of the healthcare system. There's so many layers with it. So maybe Sue, you could speak to some of the key successes that were foundational, because your mammogram program's been around forever.
We've had a women's health program for 30 years. It started as a grassroots program. We used to deal with many topics: cervical cancer, obesity, nutrition. But over the years, the funding just hasn't been there to support the program. So right now, what we focus on is underinsured or uninsured women, are educating them around breast cancer. And we were partnering with Lawrence General Hospital. Actually, this partnership just ended in December. So we're sort of struggling of where we're going to head. So we would do the education, teaching the women about breast cancer and what to look for, the warning signs, and who should get a mammogram. And then Lawrence General had a grant, and they would provide the mammograms. We would provide the transportation, the support to get the person to the hospital, and they would get the mammogram. And then they had a mechanism for them to get treatment if they were diagnosed. So now we're stuck with not having that partner right now. So it is really a difficult, because it's so necessary, but it's not state funded, and we have some small grants, but it's not enough to keep a whole program going, even a small program.
And then maybe you and Sarah could both speak to the digital equity piece, which I shared the link in the chat box about the digital equity initiative at ECCF, which, you know, this has been sort of fundamental to it. I know I have Kate Mache on the call here who can speak to this. We've got a countywide initiative. And the digital equity work emerged right out of those first few weeks as folks pivoted, and organizations like the YW sort of quickly tried to pivot to this digital realm. So Sue, I'll ask you to just quickly, you did address it in your comments, maybe speak to just one or two quick things that funders could do to support that. And then Kate, maybe I can ask you to speak to the advances that you've seen on the medical front with our digital equity work.
Well, this doesn't exactly answer your question, but one thing is we were able to raise money to have a computer lab in each one of our preschool classrooms, as well as our after-school classrooms. So we have 11 total classrooms that now each have 5 laptops. They're not like Chromebooks or something of the sort, to work with kids as they start with kindergarten, to get them familiar with how to use how to have computer access. We're also looking for funding to be able to provide, the schools sent home Chromebooks in Lawrence, as in many schools, I think, in many communities. But looking for how we can help our parents actually with that. And, you know, without reliable internet, you know, you can buy the Chromebooks fairly cheap enough, or you can buy the laptops, but you need that internet.
Yeah,
And
that's great. And I'll just make a, you know, also just a nod also to the Women's Fund, who they spoke to this willingness to do unrestricted granting right away, right? That, you know, that ability for funders to pivot to unrestricted right away was, agencies were able to leverage resources quickly to look at digital equity, and that's still very much the case. Okay, Kate, could you speak to a little bit to how this has impacted our work in digital equity from
Sure.
women specifically around social determinants of health?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, and thanks for having me here. The ECCF has just announced a partnership with the North Shore Community Health Center and the Lynn Community Health Center to do a telehealth navigator program as part of the digital equity work. This program would put an individual on the ground to help close those digital equity gaps, as everyone has already mentioned, right? And we know are just flourishing all across the county of needs, whether it be access issues or device issues, and get them connected from an equity lens on how empowering them to use the video feature of a telehealth function to, I think Steve had made a comment about this earlier, to make sure that we all have equal opportunity in that ability to access healthcare. Does that answer that question, Carol?
Yes, excellent. Thank you. And also just quickly, I put the link in also to segue that into behavioral health. ECCF is underway right now with a systems approach behavioral health grant cycle, which is leveraging a lot of these ideas as well. And that work will unfold in the spring. Sarah or Deb, did you want to speak to the digital equity or social determinants of health question?
I can say that access to laptops has been critical for survivors during this time. Courts have needed to respond to the pandemic, and thus are utilizing and experimenting with virtual hearings. And much like telehealth, virtual hearings are complicated and hard to do a lot of times on a mobile. So having one, access to a laptop, two, having access to support on the ground. I'm so glad to hear that this idea of having the advocacy to help someone navigate that is so important. So we've certainly seen that. And then likewise, everyone needing to access their mental health services, being able to do telehealth reduces a lot of barriers for folks if they have the digital access.
Yeah, I would also say too, it is, what we're doing is helping the girls ask the right questions and to be comfortable with going to the school nurse and the health center to get their needs met. And part of that is practicing it and just exposing them. The other thing that we do is we have a peer leadership program around health, teen health ambassadors that talk about health issues that girls are facing. And it's an education program for both our girls and girls in the community and for families, because we can, as adults, talk all we want, but when it comes from another teen to teen, peer to peer, it is much more powerful.
Great.
Carol,
Yeah,
Steve, I just wanted to follow up. One thought came to mind. I know the ECCF team knows Greater Lawrence Family Health Center well, and I've been working with them a couple of different ways, and including a couple of friends who were part of it. But the thought that comes to mind are those 2 buses that they put out, expanding their services during the pandemic to make sure that people were getting vaccinated, even if it was difficult for people literally to get to a clinic to get vaccinated. The nature of the problems are pretty stark and pretty well familiar. But I hope the groups that have spoken today are in touch with groups like the Greater Lawrence Family Health Center, because awareness of those people on the bus to ask the right question, and that came up in one of your stories, and I thought it was very profound. Did the right question get asked at the right moment to be able to determine the nature of the problem that was at hand? So I'm just hoping we're seeing this as a matrix where there's a bunch of people coming to work together on this. Thank you again for everything you're all doing.
Absolutely. And there's lots of different intersection and touch points, whether it's the vaccine equity work we're working on or digital equity. There's lots of overlap and intersections. Okay, I saw some great questions happening in the chat simultaneous to the live chat. So I love the good thing I'm a multitasker, right? I'm going to open it up for more questions. Just Erin, I saw that you asked a great question of Sarah, and I wanted to just share that out with everyone. So Erin Van Artelu asked if she could provide more detail about the education programming. And Sarah shared more in the chat. I won't read that word for word, but I'm going to open it up for others who have live questions. Or Erin, if you had a follow-up to the question, you're welcome to put that in the chat or do live with the whole team here.
Thank you. I think, Sarah, I'll probably just follow up with you separately to dig into the education work a little bit more, just because that specifically relates to our work as a funder. But I appreciate that blurb. That gives me excitement, and I love the partnership with other organizations we know and love in the area. Thank you.
Great. Looking forward to it, Erin.
Terrific. And again, I'll also just lift up, there's great organizations like HOC who are, of course, doing this. They're leveraging this crisis mitigation work to then leverage into the educational work that can get to the root cause, so that, the work is sort of simultaneously happening. So thank you again for that, Sarah. Okay, other questions?
Carol, can I just make a comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say that I think it's really remarkable that so many organizations and the three women on the call today, on the Zoom today, you guys have made so much space and taken so much time to deal with the mental health crises that we're all hearing about, and we're hearing about it. And, we were all busy people before, COVID hit and the impact that that's had. And I just think it's remarkable how you guys have pivoted, but the time that you've spent and how rich and the work that you're doing, that's so important. We've heard people time and time again talk about the impact and the isolation and just the lack of funding and resources. And I just think that it's so important to talk about that and make it available and, get rid of the stigma. But I really find it remarkable how you guys have spent so much time in the 8th day of the week on this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I can also piggyback on that a little bit too, Wendy. I was on a call yesterday with Beverly Hospital outlining some of the ER numbers today. And adults for behavioral health ER visits are spending on average 24 hours. Pediatrics are spending 5 to 6 days in the ER ward for behavioral health. And that's in Beverly. So I think it's just indicative of not only the crisis that was at hand pre-COVID and how it has exacerbated, and particularly for our most vulnerable folks. And so that behavioral health piece is really, really key to continue to dig in, not only from the crisis piece, but again, that root cause piece, which is a lot harder work. So ECCF will continue to share all of the partnership work that's emerging with the systems approach to behavioral health. Hopefully we have the opportunity to partner with a lot of the great partners here. But thank you for lifting that up as well. All right, I see some other questions as well. Other folks raising their hands. Okay, no other questions. Okay, well, if no one has any other questions, you're certainly welcome to share them with Megan and I. We will do a recap. If folks could put themselves on mute, I would appreciate that. Thanks. We'll do a recap of the 5 key things that we learned. We'll include some links. Steve Fink already shared that great piece around social determinants of health. And so we'll be sure to share that out. We'll include all of the decks. We'll include all of the links as well as the chat and the answer to the questions. Please continue, as well as the contact information for all of our amazing presenters today. I did want to just share a few last things happening on the ECCF front. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, some things happening. You'll see a lot of repeated patterns here that are happening on the ECCF front. We are underway with a food systems resiliency partnership grant in partnership with CDBG. It's a community block grant initiative focused on food. And we'll be stewarding $3.1 million across the county over the next year to focus on that. And so that is underway. Applications are coming in feverishly now. As I've talked about a number of times, we also have a behavioral health systems grant initiative that is open. The LOIs are due this Friday. And then we have an amazing committee of practitioners, funders, and folks on the ground who will be reviewing those and working in partnership, as I think it was Sue who maybe said in the beginning, the key importance of those partnerships to really problem solve. So we'll be sharing out what we learn throughout the course of the spring. We're also, we've also partnered again with the state, with the DHCD on an initiative. This is the second time for those that don't have access to federal and state resources, folks that are in varying states of status, immigrants and refugees. We have a systems approach to the 6 gateway cities to distribute resources to people. That's happening again. And we are working to wrap up our vaccine equity initiative in partnership with the Eastern Bank Foundation, which it's again, in many ways, a lot of the same lessons learned. It's this coalition model ensuring that the voices of the most underserved are part of the process, and that we're ensuring folks' safety in distribution and nimble and quick as well. And we've been very proud of the work around vaccinations and vaccine information. We'll be coming up with a new COVID fund report to showcase all of the work that's been happening in partnership with so many of the great partners like those on the call today. That'll be coming up in the spring. And the Next Gen initiative is well underway. We have 3 great aspects of that are coming on board this spring. We have a dynamic youth philanthropy initiative, as well as purpose parties, which are an entry point for those that are interested in learning about philanthropy, and then a next level event that is in many ways a think lab in real time, where we'll be hacking problems in real time. So if you're interested in learning about any of those, please do connect with Megan and myself. And on donor services, we have lots of new tools coming online, including a guide to effective grant making, a fund holder guidebook, and these lunch and learns. The next official lunch and learn will be on youth in June. And the next funder summit will be focused on public health, and that will be in April. That will be a virtual event. So please stay tuned, register. Both of those are going to be really rich and dynamic conversations. And thank you for spending all your time with us today. And thank you again to all of our speakers and all of your work day in and day out. Thank you.